They started drilling the dock right as I lit the lantern for my father's memorial. No call, no knock, just a yellow HOA sticker slapped on the porch. Name's Ellis Brogan. I maintain city water infrastructure. She never noticed the blueprint tube in the shed labeled signed dated. It was always there. Has someone ever crossed a line they didn't know you drew? I drove the gravel curve slow windows down. Rascal panting in the backseat wind, combing through the tall birch that lined the lake. The cabin peeked through the trees like always weathered wood-green roof, a place time forgot. But then I heard it. Not birds, not wind, not water. Hammering, metal on metal. And, as the trees opened, I saw them. A crew of 3 men in safety vests stood knee-deep in the lake, bolting beams to a freshly laid platform. A long wooden dock extended past the shoreline, jutting confidently into the water onto my land. And sitting in my father's old Adirondack chair sipping something cold from a mason jar was Laurel Vexton. My jaw locked before my hands could. She turned lazy like a cat in the sun and gave me a smile that had no warmth. "Ellis," she said like we were still friendly, like I hadn't heard her voice at every HOA meeting dismissing me as non-conforming. Then I saw her. Sadie, Laurel's daughter. Legs crossed, phone raised. "We're live," she chirped. Day 1 of reclaiming Elkharbor's historic shoreline. This dock will be a healing space yoga sunrise journaling community reflections. I slammed the door of my truck. My boots hit the dirt harder than I meant them to. Rascal barked once, then stayed inside. He could sense it, too. "Laurel," I said, walking up the gravel path to the porch. "What exactly is going on here?" She didn't flinch, just raised her eyebrows over her sunglasses. "Didn't you get the notice?" "What notice?" "This land," she waved vaguely at the air, "was redesignated last quarter as part of the Community Shoreline Initiative. Public Access Zone. It's all on file. HOA approved. That's my shoreline." Laurel sipped her drink. "Ellis, you didn't attend the last vote? We had quorum. You know how these things go." Sadie turned the camera toward me. "Say hi to the Elkharbor fam, Mr. Brogan. Or should I say, our new cabin neighbor." My mouth dried up. "That's my chair." "It's a shared space now," Laurel said. "But don't worry, we'll keep it clean." I looked past them. My father's sign still hung crooked above the door, Parker Place, 1974. His mailbox, the one we painted blue when I was 12, still stood by the steps stuffed full with paper. A coil of fishing line lay beside the porch swing. My memory, my father's sweat in every nail. And these people were decorating it like a set piece. "Who gave you permission to build that dock?" I asked. Sadie giggled. "It's a soft install. Pilot project. I never sold this land." Laurel's tone flattened. "No one said you did. But annexation of shoreline assets under Community Beautification Law Section 3B allows for repurposing if owner is non-compliant or absent." "I live 10 miles away." "You didn't respond to the notice," she said sweetly. "We gave 30 days, as required." I walked past her toward the porch. The boards creaked like they knew me. On the side fence, a plastic sleeve held a laminated sheet designated Improvement Zone. HOA, approved July 3, 2017. I stared at it. No seal, just bold letters and a fake stamp. "You can't just take someone's home," I said. "We didn't," Laurel replied, standing now adjusting her hat. "We're sharing unused space for community healing. You of all people should appreciate that, Ellis." I wanted to yell. I wanted to grab that plastic sign and throw it into the lake, but my father taught me never swing if you don't know where it lands. So I turned, walked back to my truck, heart-pounding fists tight. Inside, Rascal whined. I reached across the dash and grabbed the unopened stack of mail I'd ignored for weeks. Bills, flyers, HOA notices, and then I saw it, a manila envelope with the HOA crest dated 6 weeks ago. I ripped it open. Final zoning adjustment. Elkharbor Community Shoreline. Realignment. Parcel 14B, reassigned as Green Zone. Enforcement effective August 1st. My land. Reassigned. Without a hearing. Without a signature. I looked out the windshield past the pines toward the lake where Sadie posed with her phone hair catching golden light shouting about a new era. But I saw the garden shed, still locked, covered in moss. And I remembered what sat inside blueprints, rolled maps, the original grid of the lake's utility lines labeled by my father and Dean Rafferty before I was even born. And suddenly I knew exactly what to do. It wasn't a sheriff's car that came rumbling up my path, just a manila folder and a fluorescent sticker slapped on my cabin door. HOA enforcement relocation in process. No stamp, no warning, just laminate and glue. The notice flapped in the late August breeze, curling at the edges already sun-stained like it had always belonged there. I stood on the porch a while, Rascal sitting just behind me, his head tilted like even he knew something was wrong. Then I peeled the sticker off with slow fingers, folded it in half, and tucked it in my back pocket. Inside the mailbox were 3 weeks of circulars, 1 property tax slip, and a folded copy of the HOA newsletter titled Shoreline Visions, Building the Future Together. The first article was written by none other than Laurel Vexton. Our goal is to bring equity to Elkharbor's waterfront. No parcel too privileged, no path too private. The ink hadn't even faded, but it felt like history already, like a quiet, polite theft. Later that morning, I drove to the HOA office. The reception area was bright, overly bright, like they were trying to make up for something. A vision board hung on the wall behind the receptionist, cutouts of yoga mats, clean docks, and couples in linen standing on composite wood decks. At the top, someone had stenciled, "From Shoreline to Sanctuary." The room smelled like lavender cleaner and fear disguised as order. I gave my name. She smiled and buzzed me in. Laurel was already seated at the end of a glass conference table, hands folded like a priest at confession. Sadie sat beside her, scrolling on her phone, legs tucked under her like she was at brunch. Ellis Laurel said, all calm civility, "I'm glad you came in." I didn't answer, just sat. She pushed a laminated map toward me. As you can see, following last quarter's realignment vote, Parcel 14B has been designated as part of the Green Commons Zone. The map was a blur of color blocks, green for public engagement, blue for ecological access, orange for planned wellness zones. My cabin sat smack in the green. I tapped the outline. "My deed says I own this." Laurel smiled. "The HOA bylaws allow for shoreline reallocation under Section 5.3, especially if the property has been underutilized or fails to meet engagement metrics." "I live there," I said. "You've been off-site," she replied. "There were no public events, no open access, no community offerings from your side." Meanwhile, Sadie here has a full calendar lined up: community stretching, guided journaling, even a shoreline cleanup with local teens. Sadie looked up, gave a thin smile, then went back to her phone. "You've made a unilateral decision," I said, voice steady, "without my consent, without county verification." Laurel didn't flinch. The board approved it. "I wasn't at the vote. You were notified." My blood rose, but I kept my hands still on the table. "There's nothing personal here," Laurel said. "It's about balance, about honoring the lake. Balance doesn't override ownership," I said. She shrugged. "In Elkharbor, it does." When I stepped outside, the heat hit me like an accusation. My shirt clung to my back, damp with sweat I hadn't noticed inside the air-conditioned conference room. I drove straight back to the cabin. The sticker was gone, torn off by the wind, or maybe just embarrassed to be seen. But taped to the door now was something worse, a bright pink sheet. "Vacation structure must be vacated within 5 days. Failure to comply will result in removal procedures under HOA Community Rebalance Guidelines CRG. No phone number, no signature, just pink paper and permanent marker." I didn't go inside, just leaned against the doorframe and looked out toward the lake. Sadie's voice drifted across the water, amplified by her phone day one of reclaiming this sacred space from the past. "We're so excited for what's next. From the past." She meant me. I sat in the truck that evening longer than I meant to. Rascal curled up in the back, his breath slow and steady. That's when I saw it. A folded sheet of paper tucked under the wiper blade. Not the HOA logo. No official seal. I stepped out and opened it. Inside was a map, hand-drawn, faded from too many folds. An old HOA zoning diagram back when the lakefront still had real boundaries. In the bottom corner, scrawled in ballpoint pen, check line B12. No signature. But I recognized the handwriting. Ansel York. My neighbor, 3 plots down. Never says a word unless he means it. Retired cartographer for the town office. Always wore the same flannel, rain or shine. I looked around. The road was empty. The trees didn't whisper. Just me and that quiet warning. And suddenly I remembered a name I hadn't spoken in years. Dean Rafferty. Dean Rafferty's porch still smelled like old varnish and burnt coffee grounds. The cedar steps groaned under my weight, warped by Michigan rains and time. His screen door creaked open before I knocked. "Ellis," he said, one hand on the doorframe, the other clutching a chipped mug. Took you long enough. I didn't know I was expected. He gave a crooked smile. That makes two of us. I stepped inside. The house hadn't changed. Same woven rugs, same ceiling fan with one broken blade, same faint buzz of an old radio murmuring AM static in the background. But Dean looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner, like the years had taken a bit of height from him but left his spine intact. He didn't offer me a seat, just nodded toward the back. Shed's open. Outside, the path to his lakeside tool shed was scattered with pine needles and cracked stone tiles half covered in moss. A squirrel darted under a canoe rack. The shed door stuck for a second before Dean shouldered it open. The inside smelled like dust, dry paper, and gasoline. Maps. Hundreds of them rolled pinned, stacked in crates. Old Elkharbor zoning blueprints, electrical overlays, shoreline revisions, emergency waterline contingencies. I recognized the logo of the City Infrastructure Office in 3 generations of graphic design. "This is where everything we didn't upload went to die," Dean said. "Lucky you." One corner held a corkboard studded with photographs, black and white shots of men standing in hip waders holding tools and laughing. One of them was my father, younger than I'd ever seen him. Another, unmistakably, was Dean, back when his beard was red instead of white. He reached up to a top shelf and pulled down a thick cardboard tube, blew dust off the cap and handed it to me like it was contraband. I unscrewed the top. Inside was a long, carefully rolled blueprint. Yellowed at the edges, the paper unrolled with a soft shush. And there it was. Parcel 14B, the shoreline. My cabin. Stamped, no access zone. Mainline conduit protected, 1975 to 2075. Signed by 3 city engineers including James Brogan, my father. Dean pointed to a shaded area over the waterline. "They're drilling right here," I nodded. "Then they're idiots." His finger traced a line sharp and sure. "That conduit feeds the east water pressure loop. You puncture that Elkharbor loses 30% of its pressure grid. You'd be triggering a municipal violation, not a homeowner's spat." I stared at the blueprint. The lines my father had once drawn. The careful inked notes in his slanted script. The way he'd marked out buffer zones with extra arrows just in case someone decades later didn't understand the stakes. Dean folded his arms, looking not at the paper, but at me. "Laurel tried something similar back in 15, he said. Wanted to rezone the west inlet for paddleboard docks. Board shut her down. Guess she's bolder now, or thinks no one's watching." Dean snorted. "That's where she's wrong." I held the blueprint tighter, heart beating in my ears. Dean saw it. He stepped forward and pressed the roll into my hands. "Time to do what your dad built you to do," he said. "Fight without fists." Outside, the sun was beginning to fall behind the tree line. I drove back slow, Rascal silent in the back seat, his ears perked like he knew something had shifted. When I turned to the bend near my cabin, the lake caught the last of the light, but something new stood out, gleaming metal poles hammered into the waterline just feet from the old boathouse, directly above the conduit. The city map wasn't the only thing they tried to bury. Turns out a few well-timed emails had gone missing, too quietly scrubbed from the HOA servers like footprints wiped from a beach. But footprints don't really disappear, not when you know how to look sideways. My work table was a mess, coffee rings over utility bills, post-it notes like confetti on a slow-burning fuse. The headline from the Elkharbor Gazette stared up at me, half covered by a USB drive shoreline HOA beautification or power play. Ansel had dropped by just after sunrise. Said nothing as he set down his scanner and laptop, just got to work like he'd been doing this all his life. He brought with him a quiet kind of anger, the useful kind. "They archived everything pre-August," he murmured, fingers tapping. "But cached files still hold residual text if you know what to sniff for." I nodded. Let him work. The drone footage came from Sadie's public page. Sunset shot, captioned with some florid nonsense about rewilding intention and healing ledgers of land. But 30 seconds in her camera caught something better than her smile, the new concrete piling driving into the lake. And just beneath the surface shimmer the faint arc of a capped pipe. Right where the blueprint said it would be. I paused the clip. Rewound. Froze the frame. Opened the PDF of Dean's map and dropped the drone still on top, adjusting opacity. A perfect match. Violation. Not theoretical. Not emotional. Municipal. Dean's voice came through the phone, thin and sharp, that pipes capped under City Code 2004.116. Impacting it is a third-degree infraction. Fines start at $25,000. Can they argue ignorance? He grunted. Not with a signed plan on record. Click. Ansel turned the screen toward me. Found it. It was a string of emails Laurel pushing through an internal vote to rezone Parcel 14B. Only 4 board members responded. The bylaws required 6 for quorum, and yet the record was marked approved. Another thread revealed the grant trail. What was once filed as lake preservation support had been redesignated under community wellness programming, redirected to something called Sadie's Renewal Platform Build-Out. It wasn't just personal now, it was funded. I sat back and rubbed my eyes. It was only mid-afternoon, but the sunlight had dulled to a heavy golden haze. Outside, Rascal barked once, then laid down again. I opened a new folder on the desk, labeled it City, printed the drone overlay, Dean's specs, the email trail, opened another, Legal Counsel, signed my name on a cover sheet, last folder, Ho-A Hearing, Septi 10, slipped in every page I had, highlighted, annotated, time-stamped. 3 folders, each with enough to ignite something, or extinguish everything. And then, like timing was a cruel gift, my phone lit up, a message from the HOA. No subject line, special community meeting scheduled, September 9th, 6:30 p.m. Attendance encouraged, 2 days. That's all they were giving me, just enough rope. Question was who'd be left holding the other end. I walked into Elkharbor Community Hall with a folder under my arm and my father's name on every document inside. The overhead fluorescents buzzed faintly flickering like they hadn't been changed since the Nixon years. The place smelled of linoleum old coffee and expectation. HOA banners hung on either side of the stage, one reading Stewardship, Sustainability, Sanctuary. I found my seat in the second row. Dean sat in the back, silent as ever, his arms crossed, a slight nod, the only greeting I needed. Rascal waited in the truck windows cracked. The room wasn't packed, but it was full enough neighbors, property owners, a pair of local reporters with small notepads and weary eyes. Laurel stood at the podium flanked by 2 HOA staffers. Sadie hovered to the side, hair tied tight, blazer 2 sizes too large, eyes darting between her phone and the door. As I sat, Laurel's assistant leaned down near her shoulder and whispered, "We've got media tonight. Be careful what you show." She didn't see me watching. She didn't know I counted on that. Laurel cleared her throat. "Good evening, residents and friends. Thank you for joining our special meeting of the Elkharbor Shoreline HOA. Tonight, we reaffirm our commitment to inclusive shoreline access, shared community wellness, and the preservation of our natural spaces together." Applause scattered across the room. Polite. Tired. She gestured to a projector. A slide popped up, pastel icons, Vision 2020. More yoga. Children with paintbrushes. Someone in a kayak. "I'm proud," she said, "that since August our lakeside has been transformed into a space for healing, but progress while beautiful can cause discomfort. That's why transparency is key." I stood. "Then, let's start," I said, holding up the folder. All heads turned. "I'd like to request the floor under Clause 2.6 Member Challenge of Zoning Action." Murmurs. One of the HOA staff glanced toward Laurel. She hesitated, then nodded. I approached the podium, spine straight, folder firm in my grip. "I'm Ellis Brogan, Parcel 14B. I laid out 3 documents on the table beside me. First, the blueprint. I clicked the projector remote and the scanned map appeared, yellowed edges, red conduit line, stamp from 1975. In the bottom corner, 3 signatures, 2 city engineers, and James Brogan. This map shows a no-access designation through 2075, a mainline conduit beneath the shoreline, my shoreline. I clicked again. A drone still from Sadie's video filled the screen, the piling the shadow of the pipe beneath it. "Here is your new dock built directly above that conduit, violating City Infrastructure Code 204.117. Gasps rippled. Sadie's hand rose slightly but then dropped. She didn't speak. Click. The next image, a spreadsheet. This is a grant ledger. Funds meant for lake preservation redirected to Sadie's Renewal Platform. I turned, met Laurel's eyes. Calm. Focused. And finally a string of emails I said, lifting a printed thread. Laurel Vexton, initiating a zoning vote with only 4 responding board members. Your own bylaws require 6 for quorum. No quorum, no legal reassignment. The screen froze on the bylaws text. Silence pressed in. Then a voice familiar rose from the audience. "I voted for you, Laurel," a neighbor said, standing. "Mr. Tanner's. Old fisherman. This isn't what we meant. Not behind closed doors." A second stood. A woman in a floral blouse. You said we'd be part of it. I just wanted picnic benches, not lawsuits. Laurel stepped forward. These concerns are valid. No, I said, still at the mic. They're facts. Documented. Dated. Violations by code, by charter, by community trust. The city clerk stood near the side wall, her voice level. As acting clerk for Elkharbor Municipality, she announced we are opening a formal review into zoning infractions and grant misuse. Effective immediately, Laurel Vexton is suspended from the HOA board pending investigation. A silence heavier than any applause followed. Sadie gathered her things. She didn't look at me as she left. Dean met my eyes from the back and nodded once slow. The kind of nod that didn't say victory, but maybe not in vain. The doc sat quiet that morning, wrapped in yellow caution tape like a wound too deep to stitch. No laughter, no music, no candles in mason jars, just tape, and stillness, and silence from the lake's edge where the water had pulled back a few inches overnight. A change only fishermen or engineers might notice, but I noticed, because I filed the work order. The city water crew arrived just after 8 a.m., 3 trucks orange cones men in reflective vests, stepping with the rhythm of people who know exactly what they're doing. One carried a portable valve key. Another rolled out a blueprint laminated and curling at the edges. They didn't knock, didn't explain. They weren't here to ask. By 8:20, they had pulled up 2 dock planks with surgical precision and were kneeling beside a capped junction box, tools clinking in that matter-of-fact way steel talks to steel. The sound echoed faintly across the lake. Across the shoreline, a reporter from the local station adjusted her mic. Cameraman focused. No narration, just a red, blinking light. From behind the lavender shrubs, Laurel appeared. First her shadow, then her voice. You can't do this. She snapped, heels crunching on gravel. This dock is part of a community wellness initiative. We have active permits city-stamped. One of the technicians glanced at her, then back at the form in his hand. Ma'am, your permits do not include access to underground infrastructure. These valves were added in 1975 and are city-regulated. You didn't request oversight. That's a violation under Utility Code 12.4. She stepped forward. We'll appeal. You'll hear from our lawyer. The man didn't flinch. Ma'am, this isn't discretionary. It's procedural. Sadie arrived minutes later, clipboard in hand, face flushed under too much concealer. She began filming. Today was supposed to be the launch of our seasonal renewal circle, but due to technical issues... Her voice cracked mid-sentence. She lowered the phone. Laurel paced, barking into her cell. Her words grew louder, scattered. No, the conduit runs under his parcel, yes, but the dock is ours. We beautified it. Yes, I saw the overlay. What do you mean, retroactive denial? I stood at the edge of the sidewalk, arms folded. The original permit in my jacket pocket. The stamped blueprint tucked under my arm. I didn't speak. Didn't have to. Every wrench twist and valve crank spoke for me. By 9:00 a.m., the unauthorized feeder valves were locked. Red tags hung from their handles. One worker snapped photos. Another folded the city order into a clipboard. Sadie stood near the shoreline, eyes fixed on the concrete footings now exposed by the dropping water. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and landed with a dull clap on the dock boards. She turned to Laurel. Mom. Her voice was low. He was right. Laurel didn't respond. Didn't even look up. The reporter filmed in silence. The crew packed up. No grand speech, no finger-pointing. Just process. That afternoon, the dock looked different. Not because it changed, but because now everyone saw it for what it was, a monument to overreach. Miscalculated, misbuilt, mistaken. I spent the evening cleaning the porch, put oil on the hinges, re-nailed the loose stair. As the last of the sun dipped behind the pine ridge, I heard the soft rustle of paper sliding under the door. An envelope. Plain white, handwritten. I didn't know. I want to talk. Sadie. I didn't open it right away, just stood with it in my hand, letting the weight of the day settle. The lake behind me had quieted still, but not stagnant. Alive in its retreat. Sadie sat across from me on the edge of the ruined dock, the lake lapping at broken planks between us. Her gloves were mismatched fingers trembling against the cold, or nerves, or both. Between us sat a thermos still half full. She passed me a manila folder, worn taped at the corners. I wasn't supposed to have this, she said. But I didn't want to be part of what she's doing anymore. Inside were budget drafts, actual numbers, line items like consultant mindful design strategy, $12,000, and wellness platform retreat decor, $3,000, $250 both tagged with initials LV, not even hidden, just assumed, like no one would look twice. The morning was cold. Elkharbor's wind came from the east today, skipping across the lake with a hush lifting the edge of a torn caution flag still dangling from the last standing post. We drank coffee without speaking. I called Dean before noon. His voice rasped through the speaker, firm but calm. "People like Laurel don't stop," he said. "They run out of leverage, and that's when the real work begins." He offered to draft the reclassification letter himself. By that afternoon, I was seated in the city planning office. Fluorescent lights, paper ferns, and the dry air of bureaucratic caution. I wore my best flannel. Sadie waited in the hallway quiet. No clipboard, no phone. The presentation was short. I handed over Dean's rezoning proposal to designate Parcel 14B as an educational conservation site operated under the newly named Parker Shore Trust, a nonprofit in my father's name. The documentation included the city-verified blueprint photos of the conduit access and a one-page community support letter signed by 16 residents. Sadie's signature was last. The clerk read through the package. The board asked questions about programming access signage. Then Dean's voice came through a speaker he'd called in for the hearing. "I remember James Brogan," he said. "He believed land wasn't something you just own, it's something you care for until the next hand's ready, his son's ready." A pause, then a vote. All hands went up. Unanimous. Laurel's final appeal was noted, but the ruling stood dock dismantled Parcel 14B, reclassified HOA overreach formally acknowledged. Later that day, I stood by the new wooden post we'd planted by the trail. The sign wasn't up yet, just a blank plank of cedar waiting. Sadie walked over, paintbrush in hand. "Can I help?" she asked. I nodded once. No need for more. The lake shimmered like forgiveness. I lit the porch lantern just as the sun touched the water's edge, its light bending into gold along the quiet ripple lines. Spring had come slow this year, like it knew we needed time. By late afternoon, they began arriving families on foot, some on bikes, children dragging old gardening gloves, a few carrying wildflower seedlings in reused yogurt tubs. No ribbon cuttings, no microphones, no speeches, just footsteps and low laughter. The sign stood finished now, Parker Shore Trust, Eston 1974. Hand-carved, cedar-sealed, bolted to a post Dean himself had set. He arrived late, walking slow, but with a kind of steadiness I'd come to trust. In one hand, a folded package. "It's yours," he said. "Figured you should keep it close. The original blueprint. Laminated. Edges sealed. The signature still crisp. I didn't speak, just nodded and pressed it flat against my chest for a moment before carrying it inside. It would hang by the cabin's back door where my dad used to leave his fishing pole and the Sunday paper. Out by the shoreline, Sadie knelt beside a fig sapling, its thin stem barely the width of a pencil. She tied a small tag to one branch with twine. It read, "Second Chance." No phones in her hand today, no curated captions. Ansel helped a trio of kids scatter soil over native grass seeds. One of them, maybe 7, with a red hoodie and wild curls, held up a painted river stone. On it, in child's block letters, "This land remembers." Dean smiled at that. They get it. We stayed long after the sun dipped, conversations low, mostly in fragments, memories shared in gestures more than words. The kind of gathering that didn't need an agenda. The kind that only happens after something heavy has finally been laid down. As evening settled, the group thinned. Some took the long trail back. Others lingered by the benches. A boy, I never got his name, walked up, eyes wide, face tilted in curiosity. "Were you the one who saved this place?" I looked down, then out at the lake. "Nah," I said. "I just remembered it right." He nodded solemnly like that was enough, then ran off to chase a frog. Later, I sat on the porch, Rascal beside me, chin resting on his paws. The lantern cast a warm cone over the steps. Somewhere in the dark, a wind chime stirred one of the old ones, still missing a piece, but somehow all the sweeter for it. I leaned back, let the quiet fold around me like a familiar quilt. "We're home," I whispered, and the lake in its silence agreed. The wind chime above the porch gave one soft note, just one, as I hung the old blueprint inside the cabin, its corners finely sealed and still. That sound, like memory catching its breath, stayed with me longer than I expected. Sometimes what we inherit isn't just land or law, it's the burden to remember what mattered and the grace to fix what didn't. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quiet, wrapped in wood grain and wildflowers, and maybe that's enough. Has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise, one you didn't ask for but turned out just right? Share your story below. I read every one. And if you'd like more stories like this, consider subscribing. There's always another quiet battle worth telling.